Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thanks for stopping by again. I've been fairly quiet last couple weeks or so, as you have probably noticed. I sort of stepped back. I do a lot of work, which is separate from what I do here, and anything else for that matter. It's research work, it's analysis I've been doing for decades, and I continue to work on it. It's very fascinating. It demands a great deal of my time and energy goes into it, keeping up to date on the various things that I work with. But such it is, you know. And that plus having guests arrive, and more are coming, which is great. And you, folks like yourselves who are showing up. It's just been busy, and I needed time to just sit and think and put lots of things together. Before I got back to the simpler stuff that I really enjoy doing, but which you really are probably more interested in, like food. I keep talking about food, you know. I've got pictures, I've got photos, I've got to find the time to put them all together and edit the whole thing without making a mess of it. Well, that will come one of these days. You just have to have patience with me. If you don't, you may move along, and it's okay, and my feelings won't be hurt. Now, there are a number of things I want to talk about. The first couple, I want to keep them short. I keep getting requests, is it possible to get a 3-month rental? And typically around this time of the year. And my response is, yeah, sure, Airbnb, that's what it's called. And that is literally what is the necessary, that's what it's set up for. This is Airbnb business. So people will ask me, what about 6 months? It's not going to work as a rule. Too many expats have come in and taken a 6-month rental on the grounds that they wanted to get to know the country and so forth, fine. And then they'll stay and everything else. And then decide maybe after 2 months Panama isn't for them. And despite the fact they have a contract, they have signed a legal contract for a 6-month rental, they know that. So they just leave the keys in the apartment and they get in there, pick up their bags, get in the plane and leave. See, they have passports. They can go anytime they want to, as long as they can get out of the country before the landlord finds out. And that was going to happen because the landlord or landlady isn't going to know until rent doesn't show up, and they'll try to contact. They won't know what has gone on. They don't want to assume anything. They don't want to have to deal with this on and on until finally they give up. Let's just say it leaves a very angry person behind. And there are too many of these stories have circulated within the real estate community. So recently I was asked again about this, and I thought, well, okay, I'll ask around. And so I posed the question. And the first question I was asked in return was, are they willing to pay the 6 months up front? Okay, that's how we deal with the problem. If they're willing to do that, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to do it, but you've just it's at least 6 months, not 3, and you've paid it up front. You can't walk out on it. Now, again, people really don't want these. They don't encourage them, but it's not, well, certainly not the 3 month, but the 6 month, But they want year-long ones and so forth. And you're going to get the best deal if you go for the year. Whatever. That was just something I wanted to deal with. Now, people have recently also asked about, well, there's a lot of talk going on about how Latin America's in terrible physical problems and all this stuff, and the debt is so high, and are they going to be able to meet it, and blah, 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 blah. And I read this stuff all the time, and you have to dig in the footnotes to find Panama mentioned. They really rarely are, unless there's some reason, and there's not much of a reason in this case. We're one of only 4 nations left in Latin America that are investment grade status, and one of them, Peru's in trouble right now. Big trouble, and I don't know. Nobody knows. They have built themselves quite an economy, and it's going to be very sad if they lose that status, but they are already down to we're at the lower level of it. Understandably, we're moving up, they're moving down, and they're with us now, and who knows where they'll be in a year. I wish them all the best, we all do. It's just a very sad situation going on there. Chile is another, and it has its problems, but it is have a high enough credit rating going into this that it should be able to get by without too much tragedy, any tragedy. And then there's Uruguay, who's also at the same level that we are. So now that's about it. Everybody else is considered to be junk bonds, and that includes Colombia and very definitely does Costa Rica and many other countries. So when you have all this situation, people, what about you? What's going on there? Are you going to survive this and everything else? And I say, yeah, if anyone's going to survive it, we're going to survive it. Now, one of the basic ways to understand whether a society is growing or not, and whether you like the measurement or not, it is the one we have and we use when we compare countries, particularly. And that's the gross domestic product, which is another way of saying, in a sense, the national income of that country, the amount of money they're earning each year as a nation. And when you look at it from that particular perspective, it's the growth rate, it's the direction they're taking, and so forth that becomes very important. And it's done on a per capita basis. That means it's done, the total income is divided, as I like to put it, by the number of mouths that need to be fed, okay? The number of people. And then you come up with a number. We are, let's see now, I think Chile and Uruguay still remain in there with us, and for the moment, as high-income countries. Most of you come from high-income countries. Not all, but most of you do, and of Europe, Asia, and North America. We're at the bottom rank, so to speak, but we have moved up into that area, and it's caused a complete reconsideration of who we are. That's a different subject, but it's a very positive one for us. So we concern ourselves with it. Now, every year people make estimates of our GDP, how much it's growing that year. And we're not going to know this last year, 22, until, of course, it's over, which it isn't as I'm speaking now. But even when it is in a few days, it will be more likely 2.5 months, sometime in March, before we get the statistic for the full year. However, we do have the GDP growth rate on an annualized basis through the first 9 months, the first 3 quarters of 2022. And that, over that period of time, is 11%. We started out the year with people estimating 5 to 6% growth. We've had 7.5 out of the IMF, which really did a lot better job of it last year. And then most recently, one of the rating agencies put us down as a 9%, which is the most positive one being out there. Well, you know, I always do this. I did this last year. I just sit down. We have all the stats there for prior years. I have the stats for this 2022 through the first 9 months. We have a good indication of what we call the monthly indicator of economic activity of what the last 3 months have been like. And I can run the numbers, basically, try out different scenarios and see what happens. I cannot easily get it below 10%. By all rights, I think we're going to be double-digit growth rate for 2022. Now, that can change. I know that. But even getting it to 9.5% is going to be really difficult because we've averaged 11 for 3 quarters. We have 1 more quarter left. It's going to have to be very low in order to bring that 11% average down below 10. It doesn't really make any difference. In either case, we're going to be the leading growth, have the leading growth in Latin America. The big exception being Guyana, a small country in South America, with a very big oil deposit that's discovered offshore. More power to them. They're a very poor country, and now suddenly they have this huge amount of money, and God help them, I hope they find a good way to spend it. And I'm thankful that, you know, if somebody needs a break, there's a country that needs a break, so no more, as I say, blessings on them. Venezuela might actually do it because they're so down in the pit, so low, that 10%, they can grow that much. But it's 10% of very little, and it's not much to get excited about. Otherwise, we have no competition I can see coming, as if we care. We don't. We care only in that we're in competition with ourselves and what we expect to happen. We've had a very good year. And I've seen nothing in the last 3 months to suggest to me that there's been some horrible drop-off that's going to show up in these stats. So as a result, we're fine. Don't worry too much about us. And move on to the next one, which is one that give me a moment here. I just need to grab my glass of water so I don't stop in the middle of it all. There, that's better. Another issue I wanted to talk about, it's relatively recent, very recent, and it will probably be settled one way or another in a matter of days. But I'll mention it anyhow since it is something that pops up in my email box. We're having a disagreement here with the First Quantum, a Canadian corporation that runs the copper mine on the Caribbean coast. That mine represents about 3.5% of our gross domestic product that we talked about earlier. That number has just grown to that point now, it would be likely to increase in future years. However, nice though that may be, it has a very positive statistical impact on the general picture. The deal cut by a prior government, really, I was surprised when I saw it. We weren't getting anywhere near the income that we had anticipated that we should be able to get, given what other copper mines get, but also, for a whole variety of reasons. It was a disappointment. And let's just say there's been difficulties ever since, and especially in the last couple of years. And finally, the government insisted there had to be a reconsideration of all this. I won't even go, I will refuse to go through all the details. It's just too detailed. Boils down to is they challenged the veracity of the contract. They were willing to cut the contract, to drop the First Quantum completely out of the picture and replace them. All right. And First Quantum, of course, was outraged and was not going to do blah, 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 blah. We are in the midst of discussions now. The president of First Quantum came down the day before yesterday, I think it was. Well, I'm talking to you. They're talking to each other. Any moment we could hear a result, or it might take several days. We don't know. It will come to some sort of closure in the not too distant future. It's the nature of the thing. It has to. Now, there's really fundamentally only two ways this can go: win-win or lose-lose. No way that one party wins, so to speak, without the other one winning as well. And if one party loses, the other loses as well. So it's very obvious to everybody that, and I think to both parties, after all the talk and all the strutting around on the stage, so to speak, that this is the case. So you need to get it straightened out. My expectation here is that that's exactly what they're going to do, and they're going to end up with something that close enough to a win-win for everybody so that we can get on and with life as we have and get a better deal. And First Quantum can go on and have its primary source of income remain active and under their control. You know, they don't own the land. They don't own the coal, the copper. They have the right, however, to mine there and to run a concession to operate. The mine is a concession. It's a concessional contract. It's not something that they own forever. So this whole thing is going to get worked out. I have to have faith. And I won't worry about it unless I have to. And if I do, then we'll talk more about it. But I did want to mention it to you. Yeah, if you know what happens in copper mines in the Andes, for instance, in South America particularly, Ecuador and Peru and Bolivia, even Chile, these are areas where, even Colombia, the mines, what usually starts off is that the people living in the village feel that they're not getting their fair share of the benefits, the people who live around the mine, and they get angry. And outsiders, quote unquote, the people who are concerned with their situation, encourage that because they're, in the past, they've been ignorant of their own rights often. That's not changing rapidly. But anyhow, the key point is that the next stage then would be for the local people to insist that things change, they'd be given more, And the government says, we can't do that, we have this contract, blah, blah, blah. And then there's demonstrations on the part of the people, and then those demonstrations get out of hand when some of the younger men decide that they're going to do something dramatic. Then soldiers are brought in. Thankfully, we don't have an army here, so we don't have to worry about soldiers being brought in, but it would be police here. But anyway, soldiers are brought in to bring some sort of control in the situation, and somebody gets killed. Sometimes several somebodies get killed. And there's more rioting. And finally, the whole thing turns into one royal mess. Now, that is not always the way it works, but it's very common. It's very similar to what has happened over and over again in South America. And it's not what's happening here, guys. So that's why I don't lose a lot of sleep over this, because I think, what a nightmare. We don't ever want to see that sort of nightmare created here in Panama. And I can't even think that anybody here would want that. So we are already responding to and dealing with this differently than other countries do, and we will continue to do so because that works for us. And I have to have hope and good feeling that this will work for us again. And we'll hope that the corporation sees it the same way. So I wanted to bring that up at least to let you know. There's more to talk about. The whole issue of climate action, what needs to be done there, is now really being brought up very strongly. And I've discussed this somewhat in the past, but now it's something for the whole public to discuss, and it has all sorts of implications. So I'll be talking about that again in the future, and we'll just hope that we can work ourselves through that particular situation well, too. In the meantime, it is beautiful, beautiful weather down here. We've had a heck of a good time. I can't say that the holiday season has really been bright and cheerful. And I know the weather weather.com, it just shows a little thunderstorm, you know. We're not getting that much rain, and we're already into the dry season, guys. Hello. They'll get that straightened out eventually. But, yeah, there's rain in some parts of the country, for sure, always. And we're happy. That's the important thing. And I think it's been, on the whole, pretty decent holiday season. It's not where we want it to be, and we need to do more. And we're working on it. We're trying to get this economy to the next stage. We've had, by the way, roughly 100,000 people have come in to make use of the new convention facility over what's called the Amador Causeway. That's great. Now, some of that was just for short conferences, perhaps a day or two. Others were more involved, lasted longer. They all mean money. Right? So there's all sorts of things happening. And it's important for people that they happen. And so we're just going to have to keep pushing for employment possibilities as we rearrange the economy as it goes through changes here, just like it does in countries all over the world. So, thank you for stopping by. I will be back eventually, I hope, better than I've been doing recently. I do want to talk about this climate thing more, because it will impact the prices that you may pay or may offer for some properties. I won't be popular for doing that, as you might imagine. But it's out there. It's very definitely out there right now. They're not being subtle about it at all. There's nothing I say is going to get anybody, it's going to sound half as exciting as they're saying right now already. So that will be more fun and games for down the road. Meantime, though, as I say, we're doing well. Talking to people coming in, we're getting this a real grip on things with the Panama Wave Project and helping people. We have one testimonial up there. I don't plan on asking for a lot of it. I normally don't even bother doing that. I should, I suppose. But we are here to help people wend their way through the maze from a purchase and a renting viewpoint. So if we can be of help to you, just go to PanamaWave.com, read about it, and if it works for you, why not? Let us know, and we'll do what we can to help you out. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I look forward to the next time.